Howdy, howdy. This is Lady K. I'm not really super comfortable in front of the camera, but here's my face. I thought I'd do something a little bit different this time. I'm trying to increase the quality, I guess, variation, difference, I don't know, of the videos. So before you get into the commentary and the rest of the video, I'm not trying to waste your time, so I'm just going to kind of briefly talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. You're going to start with an actual real-time video of the piece being drawn by me to kind of give you a better understanding of how the sketching process goes, because sometimes I kind of skip over that when it's digital. I just kind of sketch it, then go digital. This is important because it shows how the flow of the drawing process can be and how long things take. I don't really like time-lapse all that much. I understand that it's easier for people to look at and appreciate, but at the same time, if you're a beginner artist, be it young or old, if you just see a lot of time lapse, you might get confused as to how long things take to actually get to fruition. You might work on something for 20 minutes and you're like, oh yeah, but it doesn't look like this thing that only took 5 minutes to draw. Well, full disclosure, the final product of the video, the picture you're going to see took 2.5 hours to complete. And that's I have 20 years of art experience, so I've cut that down from 4 or 5 hours to what it is now. So going forward, just know, when you see the time lapse, I don't want you to think oh, she got done in 5-10 minutes. If I'm drawing for 5-10 minutes, that should be the result, because it's not. That being said, I won't ramble on too much. I'll try to show my face a little bit more, get more out there or whatever. So let me know what you think, and on to the video. Bye. Alright, let's see how this goes. So I've got my reference kind of right here that I drew from the reference of Disney's Robin Hood. And that's what I'm going to kind of replicate here bigger on screen, so you can kind of see how I do it. It would be a little different from the last video. So what I typically do, and everybody differs, this is just how I do it. I kind of like to start with a head, just some kind of shape. It doesn't have to be anything particular. Sees a fox, so we can kind of do that. Working his ears. This is gonna be pretty quick because I only got 5 minutes left on the reel. And then from there, here's a little action line. And then from there, this is where his arms are gonna go. It's all gonna make sense. So then from there, his torso is kind of just a tube. So we'll kind of just do a tube there. And then later I'm gonna dress this as Jace, but right now I'm just kind of worried about how it looks on the reference. His arms are there with the sleeves. And this kind of is how I'm working out the dimensions for it, because then I can come in here and do that business. This is all pretty loose. I'm trying to do anything super complicated. We've got blocks for hands. This is just to kind of basically block out the pose. He's typically holding his little bow here, so we're gonna try to do something a little different with that once we shift him into Jace, basically. And then this needs to be probably a little bit thicker because he's got this tuft going on, and then it comes up like that. And then from here, his little legs are a little bit thick, and then they taper. I'm gonna taper that. Same with this is out. So we kind of take that out, and then he's got his little foot up a bit. So we're gonna kind of do that. I really like the animation for Robin Hood because Disney at the time didn't have enough money to really refine it. So it's got a little bit of a rougher look to it anyway, and I think that kind of makes it a little bit timeless. And we'll give him a little nose. The face is kind of going, ah. He's happy to see what's going on. That's just kind of more of a placement of where his neckline will be. And we put his hat on just for fun. And then later we'll kind of take it away. He's got his big feather. And then, of course, we've got to have this big fluffy tail. It's very fluffy. It was fluffier than I was expecting, so I was drawing it out, and I'm like, oh, he got a fluffy tail. I find animal folk like more fun to draw than people, because I've been fascinated with wildlife and nature since I was a little kid, and it's kind of part of my culture is kind of be connecting with nature. So drawing these animal folks has been pretty fun. So that's basically where we're at. I'm kind of looking to see if there's anything I kind of refine, like maybe kind of make his chest out a little bit more, give it a little more curve to it. But I like this line. I like this kind of going down like that, so I want to keep that. He's got little booties on there, and that's important too when you're dealing with like fur. You don't want to do all the fur. You just want to do these little tufts, just little tufts, just so we know that there's some texture there. Now we've got it blocked out, we can kind of darken things up. That kind of looks like a bowling hat. But we're not really, he's not going to end up having a hat anyway, so it doesn't really matter. That's basically it. Like, you see this foot though? This foot's not lined up, so what we're going to do, because this is rough, like we're just roughing it out. You just extend that foot. Just extend it a little bit, and then once we clean it up digitally, then nobody will even know that foot wasn't the right length at first. Nobody will have a clue. And we are back. So hopefully you enjoyed the real-time video, just to kind of give you more of a kind of a hands-on. I'm kind of a visual learner, so it makes sense to kind of do it like that, where you can kind of see, like, I built the bones, and so now I'm drawing over those bones digitally, which helps a lot into being able to try different things. Like these hands, I'm going to probably kind of mess around with, if I remember right. But digitally, it gives me a lot more flexibility than I can do traditional, but at the same time, like, drawing on the iPad doesn't feel the same way as a sketchbook does, and like the actual, like, having pencil to paper. I know there's ways that you can like get like overlays on your iPad where it feels like paper, but it's not as cheap as paper, so I don't really mess with it too much. Yeah, see, like here I'm editing down, like I drew those hands out, and then I decided, like, oh, they look a little too big for me, so I kind of just used the lasso tool, shrunk them down a little bit, and then kind of cleaned things up so that they matched up with like the new adjustments that I've had to do. And there's a good bit of adjustments on this. Like, if you look from like the base sketch to like the final product, like there are certain things that are just completely changed. Like right here, like as I looked at my reference again, I noticed, oh, the angle on his head isn't like what I was looking for. Why does it look weird? And so I wasn't afraid to kind of cut his head off, so to speak, because you can just as I'm doing, like, you just redraw those lines. It's not that big of a deal. Nothing's set in stone or anything. This is not final. This is, because what you saw me do is kind of like a pre-sketch. It's just basically to kind of get you blocked in. What I'm doing right now is more akin to like a rough sketch, which is like, it's pretty close to a final will be, but it's rough. Like, there are certain things that are going to need to be cleaned up when I do the line work, and I'm trying to basically like adjust things to where I don't have to do a whole lot of work once I start doing the line work and inking over basically the digital pencil that I'm doing. And same way with here, like as I looked at the reference that I had, his arms were kind of short, so I kind of extended those. Same with like the line, I wasn't liking that foot after I relooked at the reference material. And as I'm trying to fix things out, let me talk about reference for a second, because I've been seeing a lot of rah-rah on social media mainly, where people are on this kick. Again, it comes around every couple of years, of like, oh, well, if you use reference, you're not you're not a true artist, you're not a real artist, like you're lesser than because you have to look at a picture to draw it. And for those who believe that, let me ask a question. What do you think doing a live model sketch is? Because it's just a live reference. If you want to draw wildlife drawings, you have to look at the animals in order to get them accurate. Now, if you're wanting to just do cartoons or whatever, then sure, like, don't use reference, whatever. But I personally feel like reference helps make the picture more solid. Without the reference for Robin Hood here, he would not look as good as he does when I use the reference. And when I'm talking about good, I'm talking more like accurate to the source material of which that it's based on. I could have went real I like to call it artsy. I could have went real artsy fartsy on it and done like a legit fox in the robe or whatever, and not even had like Robin Hood be included in it. That was an angle, because like that's kind of how the Jace the Mind Sculptor Magic the Gathering card, which is the other part of this mashup between Robin Hood and Jace, he's more akin to like an actual fox. But since that was already done, I wanted to do something different, and I needed the reference material in order to be able to do that. Same with like when I'm trying to capture his smile, I have to keep going over it again and again in order to like get that smile right. Now right here, what I'm trying to do is mimic the line work that the Robin Hood movie has, because if you're not aware, like the production for Robin Hood was kind of weird, because it was like right before the golden age of Disney, and so they didn't have as much funding as they did for like let's say like Little Mermaid and like Lion King. So like if you look at their line work, it's rougher, and that's because like they didn't have the funds to go over and really clean up those lines like they normally do. And as I talked about in the real-time video, I like that aesthetic because it makes it more grounded personally. And so whenever I was drawing this, I wanted to kind of get one of the pins that kind of had like a rougher look, because I typically work with just LED ink or studio pen or something where it's a little more cleaner. This one, I can't recall what it was, but it was something that it looked a little bit rougher, but it also had more of a consistent line, because when dealing with Disney in particular, their line work is typically not weighted, which means that like it's typically one consistent thickness. I like to use weighted lines, but if I'm using something for reference, I'm going to try to like nail those lines down just so it's more consistent. It can kind of like change even how the style of the work looks if you're changing up like the line weight even. And this is just where I know people don't like tracing and stuff, but I'm tracing over my own stuff. And then I had to look at my other one, Bianca, for some reason. I don't remember why. Maybe I missed her. I don't remember. I think it was, oh yeah, because I was looking at like, I think the text I used later is like Bakersfield or something, and I was trying to think of like which one it was. But this is kind of paused for reasons unknown to even me, but there we go. This is also on 10 times speed, so y'all just know I don't really like going that fast, but it's something where if I didn't, this video would have been 2 hours long, and I didn't want it to be 2 hours long. I don't have 2 hours of stuff to say about Robin Hood. I've got my notes here of things I want to touch on. Like right now, this is something where like I talk about like effects, where I'm trying to basically block in colors and then like start doing some lighting effects for the flames, because as you see, I've changed my reference material, because this is now the Magic the Gathering Jace the Mind Sculptor art that I'm using for reference. And what I'm using it for is for the costume and for like the flames on his hands. And I wanted to kind of do an effect where like the light's reflecting out of his eyes. And I had to keep kind of messing with it just to get it to look the way that my brain's like, yeah, that seems like it looks cool. It's a weird way to explain it. So as I'm doing kind of like coloration and just kind of blocking things in. Like that was the other thing with like the rougher inking, is that it doesn't completely cover. So I had to basically like start blocking colors behind it just so like the white wasn't completely showing through, and then I eventually just put into a black background because that was taking way too much time. But something I wanted to touch on too for like the Robin Hood song that like you might be aware of but you might not be aware of is like da 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 da. That's the hamster song if you speed it up. So I always thought that was just kind of cute, like little cute like trivia. And let's see, what else did I want to go over? Like right now, I'm trying to just kind of get the colors right before I even like do any shading or anything like that. I always want to make sure my colors, my block colors, are just like done, because it's a hassle and a half to try to like go backwards and like and fix it later. I'm full disclosure, like I'm self-taught, so if you are classically taught, you're seeing me do stuff where you're like, why are they doing that? I ever since like high school and my little bit of college for game art and design, like I've just been figuring this out on like YouTube and other artists that I've talked to. So I've come up with like tips and tricks of my own. But if you really want to know how to use like Procreate or like how to do like full coloring and stuff, like you're seeing what I do, but there's plenty of materials online that probably could kind of go over like quicker ways of doing certain things that I'm doing. I just kind of want to show you like a way to do it, but by no means do I want to try to perpetuate the idea that my way is the best way, because I know it's not. I see other people do digital stuff and I'm like, oh man, like I should figure this out a little bit better. But getting it done's better than it being perfect. It's kind of been my mantra the last like year. So it is what it is. Like sure, I could edit out some of these things so you don't see this or that, but I feel like it kind of gives it more of a feel of like you're looking over my shoulder and kind of watching what I'm doing. Because I've had people do that throughout my art career, and I don't know what is cool about it, but like people just seem enamored with it. So I'm just like, okay, I guess I'll kind of like roll with it or whatever. But this is kind of like you're also seeing like me test out certain things. Like this is me testing out like a different way of doing like the shadowing, just to kind of give the fabric a little bit more texture. Because like the Robin Hood, because like the budget was so like sparse, they don't really have much texture when it comes to like their fabric and stuff. But then like the Jace, who's a professional artist, and that's probably like an oil painting, there is some there. So I'm trying to like bridge the gap in between the two. And I mean, I think that it turns out looking okay, but like it's a lot of artists talk about the ugly phase, where it's like our pieces don't look the best all the time because they're in process. They're getting their way there. Sometimes too, like you might think that something looks really good at hour 1, but then when you keep looking at it like hour 2 or 3, you're like, oh man, like why did I even like think that looked good? Like let me change that. And that's okay. Like that's part of the process. Like I try anymore to like not beat myself up about it. It's more of like I have to trust the process and it be what it be. So now we're kind of getting into the nitty gritty of it. Like this is like basically trying to get the form to look like there is light. Because I could have stopped, because Robin Hood doesn't really have any like shadows on himself, but like I wanted to have more of a 3D feel to it without it looking kind of corny. So I'm kind of like, this is like an airbrush. that I'm using, and then there's kind of like some blurring effects that I try to use to kind of soften it. Because, and this is like liquefy, just to kind of make those flames look a little bit like flamey, I guess is the way. Like I'm also like smudging here just to kind of make it more like opaque, make it look like it's part of the background instead of being on top of it. And the same with like some of the shadows and stuff. I'm trying to kind of mess with it and see like what works the best. And I had to basically redo the eyes because it just wasn't working for me. And you'll have that. And that's okay. Like I'm kind of like adding like kind of a glowing effect even to like his hands just to kind of like see like that's where the power is emanating from, is from his hands. And I think that the effect that I ended up having with like the lines and the little speckles, I think they work really good. I wasn't sure at first, but then like once I kind of like stepped back from it, because like that's the thing too. If you notice, like I'm zooming in and out a lot because you don't want to work on one piece too long and not like look how it's affecting the whole piece. Because otherwise, you might put a lot of work into something that once you pull away and you see, you're like, oh, I was going in a completely different direction. I shouldn't really have done that. But it looks like we're kind of coming to the close here. So I really appreciate you hanging out with me. For those that made it, I hope I didn't I didn't bore you too much. We're gonna be trying to get some new things going as the year progresses on. I'm gonna be getting some free time here shortly, so I'll be able to get like merch and different things like together. But thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great one. Keep being awesome, and peace.